Imagine having the power to literally reverse the aging process. And I don't mean, I'm not talking about a cosmetic fix, like a complete, scientifically grounded, deeply mystical rejuvenation.
Right, an actual biological reset.
Exactly. You close your eyes, the procedure happens, and you wake up tomorrow in the undeniable prime of your youth. Perfect health.
Boundless energy.
Yeah, that kind of vitality you thought was lost forever. And on the surface, I mean, it sounds like the ultimate dream, right? It's basically the holy grail our species has been chasing through alchemy and medicine since the dawn of civilization.
It is. It's the ultimate human fantasy.
But, and here's the terrifying hook, what if you found out that getting your youth back, like living inside that flawless body, is actually a trap?
A psychological nightmare.
Exactly. What if your physical body is brand new, but your soul remains just utterly exhausted?
It's a profoundly unsettling concept to explore. Because, we operate under this assumption that repairing the physical vessel automatically rejuvenates the mind.
Like getting a good night's sleep.
Right. But severing the biological clock from the psychological one, that introduces this layer of existential dread that we are rarely equipped to handle. I mean, you're essentially trapping a weary, burdened consciousness inside a high-performance machine that absolutely demands to be used.
And that terrifying disconnect is exactly the terrain we are exploring today. So welcome, everyone, to this special deep dive. And this one is actually crafted specifically for the Simplified Summary YouTube channel.
We're very excited about this one.
We really are. But before we get into the heavy details of this absolute masterpiece, I have a really quick request for you, the listener. If you are ready to explore the profound and frankly sometimes shocking depths of this narrative with us, please just hit that subscribe button right now.
It makes a huge difference.
It really does. And don't forget to like this video and share your valuable comments down below. Your engagement is literally what allows us to keep bringing you these immersive, highly detailed explorations.
And the source material we have in front of us today, I mean, it justifies every single bit of that immersive attention. It's a text that absolutely demands you interrogate your own definitions of duty and faith and time.
It totally does. Today we are examining some expensive excerpts from a truly monumental novel. It was published back in 1926. The book is called Kayakalpa.
Written by the legendary Munshi Premchand.
Yes, the legendary Premchand. And just to anchor ourselves in the specific text we're using today, our source is the 1945 10th edition. And interestingly enough, I love this little detail. The title page notes it was priced at just 7 rupees back then.
Which is such a great historical anchor.
Yeah.
That small detail regarding the price instantly grounds us in the economic reality of a pre-independence era.
7 rupees. Wow.
Right. And to truly grasp a work as incredibly dense and, multi-layered as Kayakalpa, we have to spend a minute on the mind that forged it. Munshi Premchand is a towering figure in literature.
Oh, absolutely.
But his perspective was forged in this crucible of severe compounding loss. He was born in 1880 in Lamhi, which is a village near Benares, and his birth name was actually Tanpat Rai.
Yeah, the biographical notes in our source paint a pretty grim picture of his early years. He lost his mother when he was just 8 years old.
Just a child.
Right, and then his father passed away when he was only 14. I really want to pause on that for a second because losing both primary caregivers before you even reach adulthood in, late 19th century rural India, that is a very specific kind of trauma.
It is. It forces a child to navigate the harsh socioeconomic structures of the world without any safety net whatsoever.
They're just entirely exposed.
Completely. And it permanently alters how you view vulnerability. When you are orphaned in that specific historical context, you become acutely aware of how society treats the unprotected. You see the mechanics of power and debt and societal expectation very clearly, mainly because you are entirely at the mercy of them.
You don't have the luxury of ignoring it.
Precisely. But what is so compelling is how he weaponized that early adversity. He channeled that profound sense of instability into this rigorous pursuit of education. Despite the overwhelming odds against an orphan boy in that era, he managed to complete his BA degree.
Which, just to be clear, was no small feat back then.
Not at all.
A BA in British India was highly coveted. So he achieves that, and he eventually begins writing novels in 1901, shifts to publishing short stories around 1907, but he wasn't using the name Premchand initially, right?
Right. He was writing in Urdu under the pen name Nawab Rai. And his writing was intensely observant of the political and social realities that were suffocating his countrymen. He wasn't just producing mere entertainment.
No, he was hitting a nerve.
A major nerve. In 1910, the authorities actually confiscated his collection of stories, Sosavantan. The text was officially deemed seditious.
Which tells you everything you need to know.
Exactly. It gives you a very clear measure of the man. His observations of rural poverty and colonial exploitation, the social hypocrisy, they were precise enough and resonant enough that the established order considered his mere words to be a tangible threat.
A physical threat to the empire.
Yeah, and he continued writing under various pressures until his death in October 1936.
So our mission today is to serve as your guides through the fascinating, complex, and sometimes honestly surreal layers of his 1926 novel, Kayakalpa.
It is a wild ride.
It really is. We are going to examine the extreme dangers of blind faith, the often crushing weight of pure idealism, the volatile nature of communal harmony.
And the unspoken, invisible suffering of the families who are left behind by these great activists.
Yes, that part is so heavy. And tying it all together, we're going to plunge into the mystical, almost science fiction concept of bodily rejuvenation that actually serves as the book's title.
It's a remarkable narrative achievement. Premchand seamlessly merges the gritty, oppressive social realism of 1920s agrarian India with this esoteric philosophy that really flirts with the boundaries of speculative fiction.
It really does feel like sci-fi at times.
It does. It requires the reader to be highly adaptable. You're shifting from localized political disputes directly to the cosmic scale of interplanetary travel and the continuity of the soul.
And that fusion of genres is exactly what makes this so captivating. And Premchand drops us straight into the deep end from the very first page. I mean, we open on a scene that feels apocalyptic.
He's terrifying.
It's the middle of the afternoon, yet the sky has plunged into total darkness. It's a solar eclipse, but the sensory description makes it feel like the end of days. The stars have become fully visible during the daytime.
The environmental storytelling here is so oppressive. He creates this pervasive, suffocating darkness. The air is entirely still. It is a cosmic event that historically and culturally triggered immense anxiety.
People were terrified.
Right. And against this terrifying blackened sky, we are taken down to the earth, to the Triveni Ghat, where this massive, chaotic gathering of people has converged.
It's a monumental crowd of Hindus who have traveled there to take a holy dip in the river. And the theological belief driving them is that performing the specific ritual during the celestial event of an eclipse will wash away their accumulated sins.
That's the motivation.
But the physical reality of this pursuit of purity is just horrific. The text describes a crush of humanity so intense, so panicked, that it compares the crowd to people throwing themselves into a pit of blazing fire, rather than a sacred body of water.
Premchand uses this scene to construct a devastating critique of blind faith. The text makes it explicitly clear that these thousands of individuals are driven by a desperate desire for spiritual cleansing.
Right, they think they're doing a holy thing.
Exactly. Yet, the physical manifestation of that abstract desire is entirely destructive. They're literally trampling each other. The elderly are being crushed beneath the feet of the strong. Families are being violently separated in the surge.
It's a stampede.
It is a landscape of immense, preventable human suffering, all being justified and enacted under the banner of religious devotion.
The juxtaposition is brilliant. You have this massive collective of people staring up at the darkened heavens, terrified of cosmic retribution, entirely convinced that they must secure their salvation right now.
In that exact moment.
Yeah, and in their panic to secure a clean slate for the afterlife, they are committing grievous harm to their fellow humans in the present moment. And in the middle of this screaming, suffocating frenzy, we meet two young men who are actually trying to restore some order.
They belong to an organization called the Seva Samiti.
Right, their names are Yeshwardanandan and Mahmood.
And the presence of the Seva Samiti is crucial here. The term translates to a service committee. They represent the imposition of rational, organized, secular compassion into an environment defined by irrational, chaotic fervor.
They aren't there to pray.
No, they're not there to wash away their sins. They are there to pull people out of the mud. And it's during this perilous rescue work that they stumble upon a deeply symbolic tragedy.
They find a young girl. The text describes her vividly. She has a fair complexion, large eyes, and she is heavily adorned from head to toe in expensive jewelry.
But she's totally alone.
Completely abandoned. She's lying in a literal drain, sobbing inconsolably. Her parents were presumably swept away in the madness of the crowd, prioritizing their rush to the holy water over the safety of their own child.
Which is an incredibly dark thought. And the visual of a child draped in gold but discarded in a gutter is a potent metaphor for the moral state of the crowd.
It really hits you.
It does. And Mahmood, the wealthy young Muslim man volunteering alongside his Hindu friend Yashodhanadan, he is the one who verbalizes the horrific irony of the situation. He looks at this abandoned child, and he looks at the supposed piety of the thousands of people rushing past her, and he experiences a profound ideological revulsion.
He is incredibly angry.
Furious.
While Yashodhanadan is gently trying to comfort the terrified girl and figure out where she lives, Mahmood observes the mechanics of this quote-unquote holy event, and in a moment of sheer disgust, he declares himself a Gnostic.
An atheist.
Right. And this declaration requires some careful analysis, right? Because Mahmood isn't necessarily engaging in a deep theological debate about the existence of a creator here.
No, he is reacting to the sociology of religion. He states that if this chaotic, brutal abandonment of a vulnerable child is the manifestation of true religious passion, then he wants absolutely nothing to do with it.
He's opting out.
Completely. He says he prefers to bow to that kind of religious fervor from a very safe distance.
Which raises the question, is he rejecting the concept of God, or is he entirely rejecting the crowd's commodified version of salvation? Think about how society generally defines morality. We frequently tether being a good person to strict religious observance.
We assume they go hand in hand.
Right, and Premchand takes that assumption and just dismantles it in a single scene. The individuals strictly adhering to the religious ritual are the ones acting monstrously. They're endangering the weak and abandoning the young.
Meanwhile, the man who angrily labels himself an atheist is one engaged in the highly moral, deeply empathetic act of pulling a lost child from a drain.
It's such a powerful flip. Premchand forces the reader to interrogate the utility of faith when it is completely divorced from basic human empathy.
Because the crowd's obsession with abstract purity creates a tangible sin in the real world.
Yes.
Mahmood's atheism in this specific context is actually a deeply humanist stance. It's a rejection of hypocrisy. It establishes the philosophical baseline for the entire novel. Actions meant to alleviate suffering in the real world hold far more weight than rituals meant to appease the heavens.
And that rejection of hypocrisy by Mahmood really sets the stage. It perfectly mirrors the internal struggle of our main protagonist, Chakradhar, who is fighting his own intensely personal battle against societal expectations.
We move from the chaotic macro-level societal failing at the river to a highly localized, intimate conflict within a single household.
Exactly. So let's talk about Chakradhar. He is the son of a man named Munshi Premchand. And Chakradhar is notable because he's highly educated. He holds a BA degree.
Which we mentioned earlier, in the context of British India, that degree is not merely a certificate of learning. It is a specific economic tool.
It's a meal ticket.
A very good one. The colonial education system was largely designed to produce a reliable class of middle management bureaucrats. Therefore, obtaining a BA was widely viewed as the guaranteed ticket to a stable, lucrative government position.
And this is precisely the outcome his father, Munshi Premchand, expects and frankly demands.
Munshi Premchand is a character type that entirely transcends the 1920s. He is the deeply pragmatic, economically anxious parent.
We all know someone like him.
We do. He desperately wants his son to become a Tahsildar, which is a regional revenue officer. It's a position of immense local power and financial stability. And during a heated argument, the father voices this profound frustration with his son's lack of ambition.
He tells Chakradhar that the era of the pure intellectual is over.
He claims there are literally factories producing scholars now.
I love that phrase.
It's so biting. He argues that education unaccompanied by wealth generation is entirely useless. The father's critique reveals a lot about the changing economic landscape of the time. By referring to factories producing scholars, he's acknowledging the mass commodification of education.
He's basically telling Chakradhar that his knowledge possesses no inherent value.
Right. Its only worth lies in its ability to secure a salary and extract revenue from the populace. He views his son's intellectual purity not as a virtue, but as a dangerous, lazy arrogance.
You know, I hear that argument, and part of me wants to pull devil's advocate here.
Go for it.
Isn't it a bit privileged for Chakradhar to flatly refuse a stable job when his family clearly desires that financial security?
It's a fair point.
Because from a modern perspective, refusing to earn a living when you have the means to do so seems less like noble rebellion and more like a stubborn refusal to participate in reality.
It can definitely read that way.
But Chakradhar is immovable on this. He refuses to utilize his education merely to, as the text puts it, feed his own stomach. He looks at the prospect of becoming a Tahsildar, literally a cog in the colonial machinery, and sees it as a moral compromise. He actively chooses a life of social service over comfort.
It is a deliberate rejection of the colonial economic machine. Chakradhar operates under a philosophy where knowledge must elevate human behavior, not just human wealth.
He wants it to mean something more.
Exactly. If a degree does not compel a person toward a higher ideal of service, he considers the years spent reading and studying to be a total waste. He is attempting to completely decouple his intellectual worth from his economic output.
It's a very severe mindset, and we see it bleed into his personal interactions, too. There's this fascinating dialogue he has with a woman named Manorama.
That scene is crucial.
She asks him, rather innocently, if he's out hunting for a job. He smiles and rejects the premise entirely. And this sparks a deep philosophical debate between them regarding the nature of duty versus human desire.
Chakradhar reveals an incredibly austere, almost stoic worldview during this exchange. He argues that the foundation of a meaningful life, and by extension marriage, cannot be built upon fleeting emotions like love or romantic desire.
Which is a pretty bleak view of romance.
Very bleak. He posits that human desire is inherently unstable. It fluctuates endlessly based on external circumstances and internal moods. Duty, however, is a permanent fixture. It is eternal.
It's the bedrock.
Right. It remains constant regardless of how you feel on any given day.
And he takes this argument to a pretty wild extreme by referencing the ancient concept of the Swayamvar. For those who don't know, that's a historical practice where a royal woman would select her husband from a gathered assembly of suitors.
Manorama actually uses this as a historical precedent for free will and the primacy of desire. She's saying, look, even back then, women chose based on what they wanted.
But Chakradhar counters her logic entirely. He argues that even in those ancient ceremonies, the women were not making choices based on passing romantic whims. They were selecting partners based on demonstrated valor, noble characteristics, and a shared adherence to societal duty.
He leaves zero room for casual emotion in his philosophy.
None at all. His rigidity is total, and unfortunately, this strict asceticism is highly appealing to certain observers.
This is where Yashodhana comes back into the picture.
Right, the very same man we met rescuing the child during the eclipse. He observes Chakradhar's lifestyle and comes to a really fateful conclusion. He decides that Chakradhar is the perfect matrimonial match for his own daughter, Ahilya.
Yashodhana looks at Chakradhar's deliberate poverty and is deeply impressed by it. He specifically desires this match because, as he explains to a friend, his daughter Ahilya is unbothered by material wealth.
She doesn't care about the shiny things.
Exactly. She doesn't crave fine clothes. She has zero interest in accumulating jewelry or displaying social status. He essentially calculates that because both his daughter and Chakradhar possess a detachment from material goods, their shared ideological purity will automatically translate into a harmonious domestic life.
Which is such a tragic miscalculation.
It is a massive oversight. Yashodhana assumes that a shared lack of materialism is a sufficient foundation for a marriage.
He fails to recognize that a woman lacking the desire for jewelry is very different from a woman equipped to endure the crushing, daily, psychological grind of a husband who actively refuses to earn a basic livelihood.
Right. This assumption that ideological alignment solves the practical problems of survival plants, the seeds for immense suffering later in the narrative.
And speaking of ideological alignment causing problems, it's fascinating how Premchand uses this specific historical tension, the religious disputes of the 1920s, not to take a theological side, but to examine the broader human psychology of how quickly mob mentality erases individual friendships.
That transition is brilliantly handled.
It brings us to an incredibly tense sequence set in the city of Agra. And just as a quick reminder to our listeners, we are simply reporting the events as Premchand wrote them to analyze the psychology of the characters. We aren't taking any sides regarding the historical or religious groups mentioned.
Absolutely. The sociological mechanics of what happens here are what we're really looking at. Premchand structures this scene as a masterclass in the escalation and eventual de-escalation of collective violence.
The environment in Agra has deteriorated rapidly. A severe communal dispute has erupted regarding the slaughter of a cow. The localized tension has quickly boiled over into a mass mobilization.
A furious, highly reactive mob has formed.
The atmosphere is suffocating with the threat of imminent bloodshed. People have armed themselves with sticks and whatever weapons they can find. The rhetoric being shouted on both sides is explicitly designed to provoke a violent clash.
And we witness the psychological toll of this macro-political event on our established characters. Yashodhana, whom we previously saw acting with gentle compassion toward an abandoned child, is now consumed by group identity.
He is furious.
He is positioning himself at the forefront of the mob, fully prepared to engage in severe physical violence.
And the emotional anchor of this scene is a profound sense of betrayal. Yashodanandan discovers that his dear friend, Khwaja Mahmood, the same man he stood shoulder to shoulder with at the river, is standing with the opposing crowd.
In an instant, the broad communal lines has severed their personal history.
It's heartbreaking. Yashodanandan is devastated by this. He remarks that he previously viewed Mahmood as an angel, a man of pure integrity, but the specific nature of this conflict completely overwrites his past experiences with his friend.
The shared history of service means nothing in the face of the mob's immediate fury.
It illustrates the terrifying speed at which ideological tribalism can dismantle individual human bonds. The mob mentality strips away nuance completely.
Yashodanan ceases to view Mahmood as an individual. He views him solely as an avatar of the opposing side. He is marching forward, leading a crowd fueled by religious chanting, heading straight toward a violent collision. A massive casualty event appears inevitable.
And this is the exact moment Chakradhar intervenes. But his intervention really challenges our typical notions of heroism. He doesn't arrive with a larger force to enforce peace.
He doesn't bring the police.
No. He utilizes the extreme tactics of absolute pacifism. He places his own body directly in the path of Yashodanandan and the advancing mob.
He creates a physical and moral barricade. He doesn't merely request that they halt, he issues a stark ultimatum to his own people. He looks at Yashodanan and tells him that if he intends to proceed and commit violence, he will literally have to step on his chest to do so.
He weaponizes his own vulnerability against the aggression of his peers.
He really does.
And I have to ask you, regarding the psychology of that move, is that true heroic pacifism, or is it a form of extreme emotional manipulation?
That's the big question.
Because he knows Yashodanandan respects him deeply. By saying, "Step on my chest," he is essentially banking on their guilt and their cultural reverence for ascetic figures to paralyze their forward momentum.
It is arguably both. Nonviolent resistance often relies on creating a moral dilemma so severe that the aggressor cannot proceed without psychologically destroying themselves.
You force them to look in the mirror.
Exactly. Chakradhar forces Yashodanandan to recognize the human cost of his anger. He stops the physical momentum of the crowd by forcing a catastrophic moral pause. But his mastery of the situation is truly revealed in how he handles the opposing faction.
Yeah, this part is brilliant. Once he halts the advance of his own side, he turns to face the Muslim crowd that is mobilized to defend their right to the sacrifice. This is where the scene transitions from a standoff to a psychological masterstroke.
He doesn't raise his voice, he doesn't issue threats or point to the size of the mob behind him.
No, instead he speaks to them with profound, disarming respect.
He engages in a deeply sophisticated form of historical empathy. He acknowledges outright that he possesses no authority to dictate their religious practices. Instead of attacking their current stance, he invokes the grand historical legacy of Islam.
He speaks of Baghdad, Rome, and Spain. He reminds them of periods in history where the religion demonstrated profound tolerance and granted religious freedom to its neighbors.
He frames his plea not as a demand from an enemy combatant, but as an urgent request for them to live up to the highest ideals of their own history.
He essentially tells them, your legacy is defined by greatness and magnanimity. I am asking you to manifest that greatness right here, in this moment, and respect the emotional sensitivities of your neighbors by moving this act to a different location.
The tactical brilliance here lies in the affirmation of identity. When an individual or a group feels their core identity is under attack, their default response is violent defense.
Of course.
Chakradhar bypasses their defensive perimeter by elevating their identity rather than diminishing it. By appealing to their honor and their history, he gives them a pathway to de-escalate that feels like a victory of character rather than a surrender to an enemy.
And the psychological gambit works flawlessly. The sheer respect inherent in his tone, his obvious willingness to stand unarmed in the crossfire, and his deep fluency in their historical narrative, it completely disarms the collective fury.
The tension just evaporates.
The crowd assents to his request, and a potentially catastrophic riot is dissolved without a single injury.
The resolution of the scene underscores the efficacy of Chakradhar's philosophy. An elder from the crowd approaches him afterward and delivers this profound compliment, noting that Chakradhar managed to achieve through intellect and empathy what rivers of blood could never have accomplished.
It is a moment of total vindication for his worldview.
It really is.
He returns to his community as an unassailable hero. Yashodhanam then is deeply humbled, acutely aware of how close he came to committing an atrocity. And then we get a slightly lighter domestic moment.
Yashodhanan instructs his daughter Ahilya to prepare a special meal for Chakradhar.
The narrative frames this as a cooking test, signaling that Chakradhar has proven his moral superiority and is now viewed as the ultimate idealized partner.
And it is at this exact moment when you, as the reader, feel totally secure in your understanding of the novel as a grounded socio-political drama exploring the mechanics of nonviolence.
That Premchand executes a jarring structural pivot.
It gives you whiplash?
The transition here is genuinely surreal. We leave the dusty, politically charged streets of Agra and venture into a narrative space that feels remarkably like early science fiction.
Chakradhar, during his travels, encounters a Mahatma yogi who resides in profound isolation within a hidden cave system.
But this is not an ordinary spiritual encounter. The yogi is not just dispensing traditional parables. He makes an incredibly futuristic assertion, which is wild considering Premchand is writing this in the mid-1920s.
The yogi confidently predicts a future where the confines of Earth will become too restrictive for human ambition. He asserts that humanity will develop the capability to traverse the cosmos, traveling to other planets with the same ease that people currently travel between terrestrial nations.
Interplanetary space travel. I mean, we just jumped from analyzing agrarian rent disputes and communal mob mentality straight to the concept of traversing the solar system.
It's a huge leap.
But Premchand does not frame this as mere technological speculation. He intricately blends this futuristic vision with the mastery of ancient yogic power.
Right, the yogi frames his spiritual achievements through an empiricist lens. He claims to have attained clairvoyance and the ability to perceive past lives, not through vague mysticism, but through the rigorous application of yogic science.
He actually critiques the ancient sages.
He does. He suggests they often lost themselves in delusion because they lacked the systematic approach. This yogi implies he has essentially applied the scientific method to consciousness itself.
And the stakes of this knowledge are immense. The yogi invites Chakradhar into a deeper, secluded section of the cave. But prior to initiating any process, he demands that Chakradhar swear an unbreakable oath of secrecy.
The yogi is genuinely terrified of what will happen if this methodology becomes public knowledge.
It introduces a fascinating discourse on the danger of democratizing esoteric knowledge.
The yogi explains that if individuals driven by greed, fame, or political ambition gained access to techniques allowing mental projection and the viewing of past lives, they would weaponize it.
Without doubt.
He fears a global revolution fueled by spiritual espionage. He is convinced that those in power would seek to monopolize the knowledge and would readily assassinate him to secure it.
It's a classic speculative fiction trope, the devastating invention that humanity lacks the moral framework to handle, but applied to internal spiritual technology.
Which makes it so unique.
Chakradhar agrees to the terms. The yogi instructs him to lie down upon a simple wooden plank in the darkness of the inner cave. And what follows is not a dream sequence. Chakradhar undergoes a visceral, embodied experience where he physically endures the sensory reality of his previous incarnations.
This narrative choice is deeply revealing regarding the anxieties and fascinations of the 1920s. The world was witnessing the rapid acceleration of technology, the proliferation of electricity, the normalization of flight, the early theoretical frameworks of modern physics.
The world was shrinking and expanding at the same time.
Exactly. And Premchand absorbs this atmosphere of rapid paradigm shifts and marries it to traditional Indian concepts of cyclical time and reincarnation. The simple wooden plank in the cave functions quite literally as a machine for temporal displacement, powered by the focused consciousness of the yogi.
The cognitive dissonance for Chakradhar must be staggering. He is a hyper-rational man. He recently diffused a violent riot using logic, historical precedent, and an appeal to human empathy.
And the very next day, an isolated ascetic predicts the space age and forcefully downloads centuries of past life memories directly into his consciousness.
It shatters his strictly pragmatic understanding of reality.
It does. Yet Premchand is a master of grounding his esoteric flights of fancy in harsh human reality. As mind-expanding as Chakradhar's mystical explorations are, the narrative refuses to let us ignore the collateral damage of his choices.
Right. The real world is still waiting for him.
While Chakradhar is expanding his consciousness and exploring the continuity of his soul, the material reality of his earthly life is slowly destroying the people who rely on him.
This forces us to examine the very grim reality of his domestic situation. Chakradhar's relentless activism eventually leads to his incarceration.
He involves himself in a severe agrarian dispute, advocating for the Chamars, a marginalized, untouchable caste against the oppressive, extortionate rent collection practices of the wealthy landowners.
It is vital to understand the stakes here. He is not merely handing out pamphlets. He is directly challenging the entrenched economic and social hierarchy of rural India.
In doing so, he places himself in direct opposition to powerful figures. This actually includes Manorama, the woman he previously debated regarding duty and desire, who has since ascended to the status of a Rani, a queen deeply embedded in the oppressive landholding system.
But Chakradhar refuses to yield an inch of moral ground. He confronts Manorama's father, declaring unequivocally that he will not remain a passive observer while the impoverished laborers are bled dry by the elite.
His commitment to justice is unyielding.
And the state's response is completely predictable. He's thrown into prison.
The psychological portrait of his imprisonment is deeply complex because, one might expect a narrative of suffering and endurance, but Chakradhar does not suffer.
Not at all.
Instead, he discovers a profound, almost perverse liberation within his confinement. He is placed in a cell devoid of light, yet he treats this punitive sensory deprivation as an advanced spiritual retreat.
The text details how he enters a state of deep meditative absorption. For those trying to visualize this, it is described similarly to samadhi, that profound state of meditative consciousness where the individual ego begins to dissolve and one feels a complete detachment from physical reality.
He loses all tether to his bodily needs. He actively prefers the darkness.
He attempts the mental exercise of writing in the pitch black, carefully visualizing the invisible words on the page, finding immense intellectual entertainment and deep peace in the void.
He concludes that if the mind is truly liberated, the physical confinement of the body is entirely irrelevant.
And on paper, this reads as the ultimate triumph of the enlightened mind. He manages to smuggle a letter out, cheerfully stating that he's perfectly comfortable, that the prison is merely a grand test of his resolve, and that he is fundamentally happy.
Right.
But this is where the host in me has to challenge this narrative of enlightenment. While he is achieving total spiritual peace in a dark room, isn't he essentially abandoning every real-world responsibility he has?
He absolutely is.
The narrative immediately shifts focus to his home, to his wife, Ahilya, and the contrast is devastating.
It is a severe indictment of his ideological purity. While Chakradhar is enjoying a state of profound detachment, Ahilya is drowning in the terrifying immediate reality of extreme poverty.
The romanticized vision of shared asceticism that her father, Yashodhandan, originally envisioned, has collapsed into a daily struggle for basic caloric survival.
Premchand strips away the glamour of the activist martyr by showing us the invisible labor of the activist wife. Ahilya is living in a decaying structure, constantly anxious about securing their next meal.
And we are given access to her internal monologue, which is steeped in a highly justified bitterness.
Very justified. She observes the broader landscape of social work and sees profound hypocrisy. She notes that there are numerous men claiming to serve the public who are simultaneously acquiring massive estates, purchasing vehicles, and building substantial wealth off the cultural capital of their supposed activism.
She possesses a piercing clarity regarding the mechanics of society. She struggles to reconcile why her husband, a man of genuine purity who has sacrificed his freedom for the marginalized, is rewarded with a starting family, while the charlatans and opportunists flourish.
It forces her to question the fundamental utility of his sacrifice. If the ultimate reward for unwavering, pure idealism is that your own household starves, what is the actual value of that idealism to the world?
She is the one absorbing the blunt force trauma of his sainthood. Society at large gets to revere Chakradhar, the brave martyr, but Ahilya is the one left to navigate the brutal economics of survival without a provider.
And despite her suffering, her pride remains fiercely intact.
There is a pivotal moment where Manorama, utilizing her wealth as a Rani, secretly orchestrates the delivery of a bag containing 5,000 rupees to Chakradhar to alleviate his family's distress.
To contextualize that sum, 5,000 rupees in the 1920s was an astronomical amount of money.
Yeah.
It was enough capital to instantly, permanently eradicate all of Ahilya's financial anxieties and secure their future.
But when Chakradhar informs Ahilya about the money, likely anticipating profound relief, her reaction is explosive. She forbids him from touching a single note.
She delivers a blistering ultimatum. She states that if he accepts that capital, he ceases to be the man she committed her life to.
She explicitly declares that she would rather starve to death in the dark than accept financial charity from the very system and the very individuals her husband has dedicated his life to fighting.
It is an act of pure, desperate ideological pride.
And her refusal serves as the catalyst for a massive psychological shift within Chakradhar. Sitting in the silence of his cell, contemplating the immense suffering and terrifying pride of his wife, the illusion of his own enlightenment finally shatters.
He arrives at a painful epiphany. Helping oneself is helping others. He recognizes the profound hypocrisy of his choices.
A man who cannot ensure the basic survival of his own family, who neglects the people closest to him, cannot claim to be a savior of the masses.
He realizes that his grand, sweeping obsession with rectifying the injustices of the world blinded him entirely to the destruction he was causing within his own home.
It is a bitter, humiliating realization for a man defined by his intellect. He sees that his extreme idealism was, at its core, deeply selfish. He abandoned his primary duties to chase the intoxicating high of moral purity and public adoration.
It is a profound critique of the ascetic ideal that demands the complete renunciation of worldly, familial ties in pursuit of the greater good.
This realization transitions us seamlessly into the central defining metaphor of the novel. We have explored the sociopolitical struggles and the intense psychological domestic drama, but we must return to the title of the work itself, Kayakalpa.
The word Kayakalpa literally translates to bodily rejuvenation, a total biological transformation.
And it is in this segment of the narrative that Premchand brings the latent science fiction and mystical elements to a horrifying climax. We follow a subplot involving a character named Mahendra and a woman named Devpriya.
Mahendra possesses the knowledge the yogi guarded so fiercely. Through a highly guarded synthesis of advanced scientific application and ancient yogic mastery, Mahendra manages to achieve the impossible.
He successfully administers the Kayakalpa procedure on Devpriya.
He literally resets her biological clock. Devpriya emerges from the process physically transformed. She possesses the flawless, vibrant, highly energetic body of a young woman in her absolute prime.
But the text reveals the terrifying flaw in the procedure. The science alters the cellular structure, but it cannot touch the consciousness.
Psychologically, mentally, she remains ancient.
She is trapped carrying the heavy, exhausting memories, the accumulated traumas, and the deep emotional fatigue of her long life. And as the yogic elements imply, perhaps the fatigue of previous lifetimes as well.
It is the ultimate manifestation of the existential dread we discussed at the very beginning. Her biological timeline has been violently erased and restarted, but her soul remains burdened by the entire weight of her history.
Premchand takes this terrifying concept and mirrors it in the next generation to really drive the point home. The narrative jumps forward in time. Chakradhar, our once idealistic activist, has fully succumbed to the ascetic impulse.
He has essentially abandoned his physical role in his family to become a wandering yogi.
His son, Shankhdhar, grows up in the shadow of this immense absence, never truly knowing his father.
Shankhdhar inherits the intense, obsessive focus of his father, but he channels it into different pursuits. He marries a woman named Kamala. And having gained access to the esoteric texts and teachings, Shankhdhar also masters the complex science of Kayakalpa.
He decides to perform this profound scientific mystical procedure on his wife, Kamala. He successfully transforms her into a vision of impossible, youthful perfection.
In the thematic continuity of the novel, she is essentially a rejuvenation of the Devpriya archetype.
But the cruelty of the situation is just staggering. Shankhdhar has poured his intellect into rejuvenating his wife's physical form, but he himself is completely detached from the physical world. He has internalized his father's extreme asceticism.
It creates a nightmare scenario of isolation. He gifts his wife a vibrant, highly energetic youth and then entirely removes himself from her reality.
He spends his nights consumed by the study of religious texts. He avoids all physical intimacy or emotional connection with her.
He has conquered biology, only to reject the very desires that biology drives.
Think about the psychological horror of Kamala's daily existence. She is entirely trapped. She has been given this vibrant vessel, a body that naturally, biologically yearns for connection, for touch, for shared experience.
But the architect of her youth, her husband, looks through her as if she were made of glass.
He has elevated his consciousness above physical desire, leaving her stranded and isolated within a physical form she is fundamentally denied from using.
It is a devastating philosophical conclusion regarding the limits of our desire to control time. Premchand is suggesting that humanity's ultimate fantasy reversing the aging process is fundamentally flawed.
You can invent a mechanism to smooth the wrinkles and restore the cellular energy.
But science possesses no mechanism to reset the human soul. It cannot force the emotional alignment of two individuals. Reclaiming your youth, if devoid of purpose or unmatched by the emotional state of those around you, merely constructs a different, far more energetic type of prison.
Carrying the immense psychological baggage of a full life inside a body that is desperately crying out for new experiences while being utterly ignored by your partner is a uniquely horrific fate.
The compounding consequences of all these extreme choices, the stubborn idealism, the abandonment of family, the arrogant meddling with biological time, eventually crash down upon the youngest generation.
Shankhdhar, the son who spent his life trying to understand the ghost of an ascetic father, finally reaches his breaking point.
The inherited trauma manifests as a complete rejection of his current reality. Shankhdhar realizes that his wealth, his social status, and even his mastery over the magical science of Kayakalpa provide zero existential comfort.
He is consumed by a singular desperate devotion. He must locate Chakradhar. He must confront the father who chose ideology over his own child.
He engages in an act of total renunciation. He abandons his massive estate. He leaves behind his perpetually youthful, agonizingly isolated wife. He sets out into the world entirely on foot.
The visceral descriptions of his journey are haunting. Shankhdhar wanders barefoot through the darkness. The narrative details his feet being sliced open by sharp stones on the path.
He is physically exhausted, suffering from severe hunger and thirst, yet he is propelled forward by a manic, almost terrifying need to simply look upon his father's face.
He wants to touch the dust of his feet and demand an answer on how a man is supposed to endure this life. He makes a vow to either locate his father or die in the wilderness trying.
It serves as the final, brutal indictment of Chakradhar's initial decision to forsake his family in the name of the greater good. By removing himself to save the world, Chakradhar created a psychological void in his son so immense, so agonizing, that it eventually consumed and destroyed his son's entire existence.
The macro-level salvation caused micro-level annihilation. Against all odds, the bleeding, starving Shankhdhar finally tracks his father down. But if you are expecting a cathartic, tearful reconciliation, Premchand denies it completely. The meaning is profoundly heartbreaking because of its coldness.
Chakradhar does not offer the emotional rescue his son is dying for. He calmly admits to Shankhdhar that he has been quietly observing him from afar for years.
He acknowledges his son's struggles and claims to possess a deep love for him. However, he unequivocally refuses to return to the family home.
Chakradhar looks at his broken, bleeding son and states that he has irrevocably chosen his path. He has fully, permanently assumed the identity of the detached yogi.
He cannot and will not re-enter the chaotic, painful sphere of domestic life that he intentionally escaped. He acknowledges the severe trauma his absence caused, but his spiritual detachment is absolute.
He is a wall of stone. Shankhdhar, after renouncing everything and destroying his own body to find his father, is met with an immovable wall of spiritual indifference.
And this devastating personal rejection transitions directly into the majestic, sweeping final imagery of the novel. Premchand utilizes this closing scene to place the entirety of the agonizing human drama we have just witnessed into a vast, almost terrifying cosmic perspective.
The narrative camera pulls back from the characters. We find Chakradhar seated on a train, arriving in the ancient, deeply sacred city of Kashi.
He is staring out the window as the massive steel train crosses the great bridge spanning the Ganges River.
Premchand constructs this visual with immense, deliberate, symbolic weight. Chakradhar gazes out and observes two distinct realities bordering the water.
On one bank, he sees sprawling, lush, vibrant greenery. It is nature existing in its pure, unthinking, biological state, growth and decay happening without anxiety.
And on the opposing bank, the skyline is dominated by the towering ancient temples of the city. These structures stand as the ultimate physical manifestations of human endeavor, of our desperate religious striving, and our endless, frantic search for cosmic meaning.
And cutting directly through the center, dividing the unthinking natural world from the anxious human world, is the Ganges itself. The river is described as flowing slowly, with immense quiet power, moving endlessly toward eternity.
The metaphor here is staggering when you lay it over the events of the novel.
Think about the intense, burning intensity of everything we just explored. The suffocating terror of the crowd crushed during the eclipse. The bitter, foundational arguments between father and son regarding money and the purpose of a life. The explosive near riot in the streets of Agra.
The silent, starving, fierce pride of Ahilya sitting in her decaying home. The psychological torture of Kamala, trapped in a flawlessly youthful body while her husband ignores her existence.
The bleeding, shredded feet of a son who destroyed his life searching for a father who did not want to be found.
All of that severe human suffering, the political unrest, the grinding poverty, the unnatural manipulation of youth, the generational trauma.
The river stands as the embodiment of the eternal, unstoppable flow of time. And the most terrifying and beautiful aspect of the river is that it is completely, utterly indifferent to all of it.
It does not.
It just keeps flowing. The human beings frantically running around on the banks are trying to reverse the aging process. They are trying to fix the colonial economy. They are trying to achieve enlightenment in dark cells. They are desperately trying to find their fathers.
But the river just moves toward eternity, completely unbothered by our morality or our pain.
It is a massive emotional crescendo. Premchand ties every single theme: the arrogance of fighting time, the crushing weight of our chosen duties, the volatile nature of our desires, and the immense, quiet power of a universe that will effortlessly outlast all our little human struggles into this single, stunning final image.
It demands that the reader step back and appreciate the scale of existence. The ideologies we fight for and the traumas that define us feel universally important to us in the moment, but projected against the backdrop of the eternal river, they are nothing more than brief ripples on the surface of the water.
As we conclude this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought. An idea that builds upon the core science fiction premise of the text, but turns the mirror directly toward you, the listener.
A thought experiment evaluating our true relationship with time and memory.
Exactly. Imagine that tomorrow morning, modern medical science publicly announces they have achieved the reality of Kayakalpa. They offer you a scientifically sound, perfectly safe, complete physical reset.
You step into a medical facility and you walk out possessing the exact body you had, or the idealized version you wish you had, in your absolute physical prime.
You are granted perfect health and decades of endless cellular energy.
But the critical caveat from the novel remains firmly in place. The scientific procedure only interacts with your biology.
You retain every single memory you currently hold, every deep trauma, every profound heartbreak, every single moment of spiritual and emotional exhaustion you've accumulated in your life up to this exact second remains locked in your mind.
You are handed a brand new, high-performance physical body, but your soul is exactly as old, as tired, and as heavily burdened as it is right now.
The profound question is, would you actually accept the procedure?
Would living for another century in a vibrant, flawless body actually become a psychological prison if your internal self feels incredibly old?
Would the surplus of physical energy simply provide you with more time and stamina to be haunted by your past mistakes? Would you take the deal?
It forces an immediate evaluation of what we truly prioritize. The sheer chronological length of our physical existence, or the peace and resolution of our internal consciousness.
I am genuinely curious to know how you would navigate that choice. Please drop down into the comment section and leave your answer. Would you take the Kayakalpa? And while you're down there, please ensure you subscribe to the Simplified Summary YouTube channel and hit the like button on this video. Your continued support is the exact reason we are able to produce these comprehensive, deep dives. Thank you for spending your time with us exploring the incredible depths of Premchand's world. We will be back with another deep dive into fascinating sources very soon. Take care and keep questioning everything.